Hierdie is 'n heerlike gesprek. Ek kan nie wag vir dit nie. Ons gaan vanoggend gesels met Alex van der Heever en hy het 'n boek geskryf saam met Renias Mhlongo. This is Changing a Leopard's Spots en hulle is spoorsnyers. Hulle het nou al reg oor die wêreld ons 'n bietjie meer uitvind van beere tot soos hulle sê jaguars en pumas en leeu's. Van Australië en die Outback. Ek weet nie wat jy als kan spoorsny nie, maar dit gaan ook oor hulle verhouding en veral so met Madiba dag wat mense aan dink, chaos, dat mense so 'n bietjie uitreik na ander mense. So Alex, good morning.
Good morning to you. Thank you for having me.
No, it's lovely. I haven't seen or read the book yet, but just my research and I saw other interviews. So just for introduction, just tell us about your background growing up on the farm and a bit of Renias's background. I mean, it was worlds apart.
You know, completely. The moon meeting Mars. It was, I grew up on a farm in the Western Cape at Aberdeen Angus cattle farm there outside Plettenberg Bay. A regular person who grew up near the coast. And Renias was born in what is today the heart of the Greater Kruger National Park. So, and he's a Shangaan man, and he grew up as a hunter-gatherer, looking after his father's cattle in the early days from the age of 7. As young as 7 years of age, he was given that responsibility to look after his father's goats and cattle in Big Five country.
It's good morning from Elsa here as well. I would like to find out, I mean, with your incredible journey with Renias in hand, what inspired you to write Changing a Leopard's Spots?
So, Elsa, thank you. I just felt that, well, we felt that South Africa probably needed some good news, firstly. And it was published the day after lockdown last year. So from a publisher's perspective, not a great time to publish a book, but probably timely in terms of people who were stuck at home and had more time to read books. But I felt that we had an interesting and unique story to tell. As I alluded to earlier, Renias and I come from completely different backgrounds, language groups, cultures, and we've come together. We started working together 25 years ago, and a lot has happened. We've traveled the world tracking many of the most animals, the most charismatic animals, the grizzly bears in North America, and all these jaguars in the Amazon and so on. And I just felt that we had an interesting story to tell, that it was an example of where a white South African and a black South African can come together and can create magic together, and that we can be productive if we just spend the time to get to know each other.
Alex, I want to talk about that, and I always say being privileged or a privileged upbringing, never feel guilty about it, because you're a kid. That was just your life, and it's worlds apart. If I listen to about his story, we're also being forcefully removed out of the Kruger National Park into a township, but. So just reaching out and some tips, finding each other, just having respect for someone and say, I understand that your upbringing was more difficult, but that's not the focus point, is to show that a beautiful friendship can grow if we understand and just love each other.
No, absolutely. And the first step has to be to acknowledge exactly what you have just said. That's the first step, is to acknowledge where we come from, acknowledge that as South Africans, we've all got some baggage, emotional baggage, historical baggage, and just to say, and I remember having the conversation with Renias in the early days, that I know I represent a people that did certain things. And so I acknowledged that with Renias, and I remember that conversation very well, and it was massive in the journey of our journey together. I could see that. I mean, I once asked him, how did you feel after that conversation? And he just said, my heart opened. And I think that's the first step. We've got to acknowledge that we all have these prejudiced thoughts about other people, these biased, and which often comes out in little tiny biased behaviors. That's the first step, is to acknowledge.
And it's a crucial mind shift, hey?
No, absolutely. And everything begins with trust. Trust forms the absolute basis, and I know there's a lot spoken about trust out there, but it really is the foundation of any good relationship. If I know that I am experiencing the real you, that you are authentic in your conduct with me, if I know that you care about me and my success, and if so I'm empathetic, and you are empathetic towards me. If I know that your reasoning, your judgment is sound in my conduct with you, if those three legs are in place, if I know that you are authentic, you have a level of empathy towards me and my situation, and there's logic that I can trust, there's sound judgment on your side. Those are the three drivers to any trusting relationship, and it goes massively to diverse relationships too.
Alex, just stay tuned. I want to talk about Tracking Academy a bit later, and also if you got to the pumas in Patagonia. So bly net ingeskakel. As jy nou net ingeskakel het hier by die groot ontbyt net na 7, ons gesels met Alex van der Heever, mede-skrywer van Changing a Leopard Spots, en jy kan ook as jy die onderhoud gemis het op ons YouTube kanaal gaan kyk. Maar baie interessant, hulle het wêreldwyd spoor gesny agter wilde diere aan, en dit was Alex en dan ook Renias Mhlongo, en hierdie boek gaan ook oor hulle vriendskap, en is ook so in konteks met Mandela-maand om te sien dat mense ongelooflike vriendskappe kan bou met mense wat anders groot geword het as jy, en ek dink soos hy gesê het, hierdie land het 'n bietjie hoop nodig, baie inspirerend. So Alex, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I just want to talk about tracking, how you ended up into tracking, and I want to talk about if there was ever close encounters, because you went all over the grizzly bears, North America, jaguars in Amazon, rare pumas or pumas in Patagonia, and even animals through the Australian outback. So just a little bit of background how you end up being a tracker.
Well, as a young boy, I grew up just wanting to track. When I remember playing hide and seek on the dunes in Plettenberg Bay, and when my friends would go and hide, for some reason I thought the easiest way was just to follow their tracks and find them. They could never believe how I could always find them so quickly. So it was something that I was just naturally interested in. And then when I was paired with Renias Mhlongo in 1995 at Londolozi Game Reserve, it soon became evident to me that he was one of the top wildlife trackers, not only in South Africa, but in the world. And he taught me to track. And the two of us went through the various tracking certifications right up to senior tracker. And that's been our journey. And so we've made a life from tracking. And as you mentioned, we've tracked in all those amazing places. But in the mid-2000s, we started to have a conversation about how do we ensure that the next generation of wildlife trackers receive the training and inputs like Renias did, with rapid urbanization over the last 30 or 40 years. Traditional people, rural people don't learn tracking the way they used to from their fathers or grandfathers. And so the only way left to us was to formalize that training. And so Renias and I stepped away from our cushy jobs at Londolozi into the cold, chilly wind of unemployment in 2009. And in 2010, we started the Tracker Academy. And I must be clear here, we started it with the support, funding, and founding of Mrs. Gaynor Rupert, who helped us get going. And Tracker Academy stands as an NGO. This is the badge on my shirt here. We chose the hyena as our logo because the hyena is the greatest tracker in the animal kingdom. And it's also an extraordinary caretaker of the next generation, which in many ways shared our philosophy of wanting to ensure that the next generation of wildlife trackers was not lost. And so basically our mandate, our reason for being is to restore these ancient African skills and to make sure that they are still relevant in modern conservation efforts.
I'm very curious, what did you track in Australia? And maybe some interesting stories like from grizzly bears, but I'm curious about Australia. It was definitely not kangaroos, but you can see them, they're just hopping. Boom, boom, boom.
We tracked kangaroos and dingoes in Australia. We took an executive team from the ANZ Bank in Sydney. We 6 or 8 of them tracking in the outback, and we used the metaphor of tracking to convey various business and leadership lessons. That it's part of a program called Tracking Success that we have developed over the last few years. So we took them tracking, we immersed them in the skills of tracking, and then we explained to them, and we did workshops on how tracking a lion, a grizzly, or a kangaroo is in no way different to tracking a project or a customer or happiness or wealth. It's the same It's the same process. Wildlife trackers track wild animals, and they cannot be controlled. And so they've developed an ingenious, very logical process to handle all the uncontrollable factors beyond. So that's why. So we not only do we track animals for conservation purposes, we also take people tracking in the bush to teach them about how to improve their leadership skills or professional skills in some way or another. So, yeah, I mean, tracking, there's no doubt that of all the wild animals Renius and I have tracked, grizzly bears are the most dangerous. They're incredibly smart animals, and they don't give you a warning, not like a lion or an elephant is going to give you a warning to tell you that it's upset. They just come at you. And I think they know their strength. They know that they could easily overpower a human. So you've got to be incredibly vigilant, incredibly aware. Fortunately, we didn't have any major issues in Yellowstone where we tracked grizzlies, and we tracked wolves there too. But it was quite nerve-wracking tracking through the high grass, knowing that a grizzly mother and her 2 baby cubs were somewhere in the vicinity. I can tell you, all your senses are alive at that moment.
Alex, what other lessons have you learned along the way that you bring across into the power of relationships?
So it's a presentation. The power of relationships is a presentation that Renius and I started as a talk around the campfire in the Boma at Londolozi. And it's a collection of 3 stories. The first is a story of when we were tracking a leopard down in the Donga, and this leopard exploded out of the bush at me. And I got such a fright that I stepped back and I fell over a log, and my rifle was smashed out of reach, and this animal was right over me. And Renius, long story short, was able to extract us safely. He was standing back to the left of me, and he got us out. And it was just an incredible moment there where I had to give over everything to him to protect us. So that's the first story. The second story is he then invites me to his home village, Dixie, the same place he was sent in the late 1960s, him and his family, when they were evicted from the Greater Kruger. He now invites me to Dixie. And bearing in mind, I was the 12th ranger that he'd worked with. He'd invited all 12 of them, or 11 of them before me, and I was the first one to agree to go. So this was quite big in his mind. It was very big for me because now I went to go and meet this man's family and immerse myself in his culture. And he started to teach me Shangaan, and I started to teach him English. And at that time, in the mid-1990s, we couldn't speak each other's language. Today, we are fluent in each other's languages. And then the third is I then take him to London, having never been outside of the Kruger National Park, let alone South Africa, or let alone Johannesburg. I take him to London for 2 weeks. First time he's seen the ocean, first time he'd flown on an aeroplane. And so the story of the power of relationship tells those 3 stories and extracts these lessons that we learned and the insights that we gained on each other through these 3 experiences. And the presentation is designed to open people's minds, open people's hearts about if you're prepared to immerse yourself in someone else's life, if you're prepared to take that step, learn their language, learn their culture. And I'm talking to all people in South Africa now, that we are able to understand each other better, work and trust each other better, and ultimately South Africa Inc. can be a far more productive place.
No, that's very, very inspiring. Just on a practical note, for people, I mean, someone's maybe watching and say, their kids, how can they get involved to Tracking Academy? Do you just contact you guys and get involved even as sponsors?
Yes, you can. Our website is trackeracademy.co.za. We're a donor-reliant organization, so we need those donations. We train 24 young men and women, all from rural villages, all of whom are unemployed, most of who live in villages around national parks. And we put them through a 1-year formally accredited program. And in 12 years that we've been going, we have trained just under 200 professional wildlife trackers, of which 90% are now in permanent conservation jobs, all of whom were without jobs before they arrived with us. So our market, so to speak, are rural unemployed people. But for people who have the means, we are also involved with a company called Eco Training, who run who run tracking courses, 2-week tracking courses run by Tracker Academy graduates, top graduates who've now graduated and have become instructors in their own right. So there are various ways to get involved with tracking.
Alex, thank you so much. Can't wait to get my hands on this book. Yeah, and I guess you on your way tracking something. So enjoy your day.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you so much.
En dit was Alex van der Heever. Jy kan daai boek gaan soek, Changing Leopard's Spots. En ek dink veral na hierdie chaos week. Dit is altyd van die positiewe stories wat ek nou gesien het oor die naweek ook, hoe mense klein dorpies saamgestaan het. Jy weet, vir die eerste keer kyk jy na jou buurman en besef, hoor, ons is altyd besigheidsmanne, al verskil ons in geloof en in kleur en in agtergrond en selfs ander lande, en ek dink dit is presies wat hulle in hulle boek ook wil wys, en ek dink ons as Suid-Afrikaners saam kan 'n verskil maak. Nee, kop skuiwe.
Kop skuiwe.
Kom ons gaan